Hi, so this is part 2 of my blog that I started on my kidney donor workup process. Now from the last one I said I was going to detail in this all the tests that I've been through so far and what happened in that process. The main thing being is that once you are okayed in the first instance, so that's once you've been through your cross-match blood tests and check you've got no resistance to your potential recipient, and also check that you've got the same blood group. So I had to go for a day's full testing, and now that covered a bit of everything. So the main thing that I had was a GFR. So what they do is they inject you with a radioactive dye, goes straight into your arm. It doesn't hurt, it's the same as a blood test, it's a short, sharp scratch. You did get a bit of a cool sensation going up your arm, that was a bit strange, but it's not painful. For me, I'm the biggest wimp about needles, can't stand them, never have. And yet, these past few months have definitely cured my phobia of that. You know, blood tests now just seem quite sort of normal and everyday. So it's probably had some good effects, really. But yeah, so they put the radioactive dye into your arm. You then go and sort of sit down for an hour or so, and then they take blood tests at 2, 2.5 and 3 hours. And then this allows them to show how the radioactive dye has come through your kidneys and how it's filtering it. So from that they can give you a GFR level. So I might have said back on my other blog that my mum is currently a GFR of 11. I'm a GFR of 93. So you can see there's obviously quite a big difference there. And that was the test that allowed them to tell me that information, so I can know exactly where I stand. Now they have to make sure that obviously that GFR level is going to be split in half when my kidney goes. So if I'm currently 93, so you're looking just over sort of 48 I'll be left with, which they have to make sure it has to be a certain level, otherwise they won't do the operation. So I had the GFR, that was fine. That same day I also then went for an ECG, so just a basic heart trace, just to check there was no irregularities or anything that I didn't know of. An X-ray of my abdomen. I think that again is just to see sort of where your kidneys plumbed in, check there's nothing, no scarring or anything on your kidneys that they can see. I had to have urine samples and blood pressure monitor. The blood pressure they do 3 times over. Now at the time mine came back a bit high, so I was sat there about to be injected with radioactive dye, so maybe I was a bit anxious they can let me off. But no, just to make sure, they then sent me for a 24-hour blood pressure monitor. That was fun. In fact no, it was a pain in the backside, but still, you get had a box sort of strapped to my waist from one morning, and literally sort of every 20 to 40 minutes it would inflate itself and record the data on a little box that I had tied around my waist. Was a bit of a pain, couldn't have a shower for 24 hours, but you get on with it and it was fine. And then from that it showed that there was nothing irregular. Like I said, obviously just been a bit anxious on the day, and the rest of the results came back normal. So that was an extra test that I had to have done. And again, when you're going through this process, if there's anything that's highlighted that isn't quite as it should be, they'll look into it further. That's the whole reason we do it. I mean, you know, we're only talking about this today. There are certain donor potential recipients, you know, that they're ready to go, but their potential donor is just not ready, and the process can take a long time because they're having extra tests for bits and pieces if things aren't quite as they should be. But the main thing at the end of the day is making sure that you're healthy enough to do this, and they won't rush it, and if they don't think you're ready, you know, they'll carry on doing different tests and to make sure they do it at the right time and that it's safe for you, or as safe as it possibly can be. There's no guarantees about surgery, and you know there's risks with anything, but I've gone into this with my eyes open. I know about those risks and I'm prepared for those risks, so to me it's not a problem. So after that day of testing, I was then, well in fact it was backwards actually. It was supposed to be a CT scan, and then you have to go and meet with an independent assessor from the HTA, which for those that don't know is the Human Tissue Authority. Mine was backwards, so we had to go, we got an appointment for our HTA approval. Now that was myself and my mum. We had to go to a different hospital and met with an independent assessor who works on behalf of the HTA. Now he saw my mum first, then he spoke to me, so he spoke to each of us individually, and then he spoke to us both together. It was over in 10 minutes, you know, it wasn't necessarily in any depth, but it was basically just to check that I was aware of the procedure, I didn't explain things properly, I hadn't been coerced or bribed into this, and I wasn't being paid thousands of pounds for my kidney on the black market or whatever else. But no, it was quite straightforward, and from that he said that day, you know, you haven't got any sort of reservations. He was happy to put forward that we were doing the surgery for the right reasons, and that he could give us the okay on that, and he'd report back to the HTA, so that was good. From that I had my date for my CT scan, which was only about 2 weeks ago now, so where are we now? So yeah, start of September I had that done. Now, CT scan itself, it wasn't that bad, you know, the hole that you get sort of slotted in and out of, it's not, you know, it's not like your MRI scans as sort of close up and personal and quite claustrophobic. I was absolutely fine. The process itself didn't bother me. Of all the tests I've had done, in all fairness, the CT scan is the only one that was a bit unpleasant. Not you know, wasn't painful, but the contrast dye that they put into you through the cannula, because what they do, you'll get put in the machine first of all, they'll take images without any dye in, so they can just see your kidneys as they are. Then they put the dye in, and then they redo the images so they can see both sides, and again how your kidneys are working, where they're plumbed in, how many lines you've got coming out of it, etc. Now, when they injected the contrast, in all fairness, that was the bit, you do get a real strong sensation that you need to wee. And it wasn't nice. Like you do kind of feel like you've lost control of the lower part of your body for a moment. Obviously you don't wee yourself, so don't panic in that sense. But it's just a bit of a strange feeling. And I also felt sick for a couple of minutes, but that did wear off. You know, it wasn't a problem. Just sort of got on with it. So it wasn't great, but needs must. So CT scan was a bit of a pain. Now from that, I got a phone call the other day to say that it highlighted that whether it was bad imaging, the CT scan hadn't come out as clearly as they wanted to, but also the technician that read them, great NHS, hadn't quite described it properly to the professor, the consultants and that, and it sounded like I had 2 ureters. Now for those of you that don't know what a ureter is, basically it's the connection that goes from your kidney down to your bladder. Most people have 1, I apparently have 2. Great. So I've got what's called a 2-plex ureter. Now it's not a problem, they've already told me it shouldn't cause any adverse effects or anything. So I've got to go back in tomorrow, and they're going to inject me with the contrast dye again, but this time I'll just have an X-ray, and then between the X-ray and the CT scan they've already got, they should be able to get a clear image of where what they're dealing with. They've told me they're going for my left kidney, which is fairly standard because it's harder to get the left kidney out of the donor, but it's easier to put in the recipient. Whereas the right one is easier to get out of the donor, but harder to put in the recipient. Don't really know why. I think it's because one of them's I think the left one is on a slightly longer stem, so it's easier to get to. Although they're obviously both sort of planted right well at the back, which is one of the main reasons why it's quite uncomfortable surgery, because they do have to literally sort of move your bowel right out of the way and move your bits and pieces inside around. So I've been told that can be quite uncomfortable afterwards. I've got that test tomorrow, that'll be coming up, not a problem, fine. I got called in today, in fact with my mum, we went in, did some mother-daughter bonding over some blood tests, that was fun. So we had those done, that was their cross-match, which again, obviously being the week before surgery, they've got those done out the way. But we also had to have 2 swabs for MRSA. You get given the swabs and you do them yourself. The first one, you swab the inside of one of your nostrils, which is nice. The second one, this was great fun, you have to swab your perineum. Now if you don't know what that is, the politest way of putting it, it's the bit in between your front bits and your bum, basically, that little gap of skin. But yeah, you have to swab that. That was really good fun. I'm sure you'll look forward to that if you are going through this process. But again, it's all about safety and making sure that people are healthy and whatnot. So we had the MRSA swabs today, and apparently we'll have to do them again the day before surgery next week. So that was the main testing day, and so far everything, as I say, bar those little bits and pieces which they ironed out, everything's been fine. So the next step is obviously coming up to the operation, which is in 8 days' time. So on my next vlog I shall detail sort of the current stage of where we're at now, so people can really sort of get an idea for what's happening. Now the days are ticking down and it's getting a lot closer. So if you want to look on to part 3, and I'll speak to you then.